Missouri is ducking Kansas in a bowl game? Really? Is this true? Let's talk about it. Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of ShowMeFootball.com, and I'm here to set the record straight on this rumor that came from Brett McMurphy of Action Network. Action Network reports the border war between Missouri and Kansas has been dormant since 2011, but there was an opportunity for the iconic rivalry to resume in the Liberty Bowl this month. There was just one problem. Missouri didn't want to play Kansas, so the matchup will not happen, industry sources told Action Network. The Jayhawks, who are making their first bowl game appearance since 2008, were not opposed to playing the Tigers in a bowl, sources said. Schools provide their bowl preferences and the conferences. Bowls and schools usually come to an agreement whenever possible. It's not unusual for schools to request not playing certain opponents in the postseason, sources said. The Liberty Bowl is one of three that matches SEC versus Big 12 opponents. The other two are the Sugar Bowl and Texas Bowls. Missouri and Kansas are both 6-6. A 6-6 team dictating who they don't want to play in a bowl, an industry source said. What a world. What a world. Brett McMurphy and Action Network, which, I'll be honest, I've never really heard of Action Network before this whole Missouri-Kansas bowl game story. They're the only ones really reporting on this at all. And then, of course, other media outlets took it and ran with it. I'll just come out and say right away, I don't really believe this to be the case. I don't think Missouri is afraid to play Kansas. I don't think that's what this is here. I think what happened is that Missouri didn't want to play in the Liberty Bowl, or they don't prefer the Liberty Bowl. They played in the Liberty Bowl already in 2018, but since Kansas really wants the Liberty Bowl, they're claiming that Missouri doesn't want to play in the Liberty Bowl because it would be against them, when in reality, Missouri just doesn't really want the Liberty Bowl. And a part of the story that people aren't really talking about is that a Missouri-Kansas matchup isn't really the Liberty Bowl's first choice either. Most people have them putting Arkansas and Baylor in the Liberty Bowl, not Missouri and Kansas. So really, this is a complete non-story. Gabe DeArmond of Power Mizzou also tweeted this out, talking on the story. Two things can be true. Mizzou didn't particularly want to play in the Liberty Bowl, and Mizzou didn't shut down a game against Kansas. Don't believe Liberty was high on Mizzou's list, but also have been told Liberty's first choice was never Mizzou. So whatever Kansas source that was trying to spin this somehow being Mizzou's fault that they're not matching up in a bowl game, be better. Come on. This whole thing is also pretty rich coming from Kansas and their fans who are complaining that Missouri is ducking them in a bowl game, because let's not pretend like Kansas didn't duck Missouri for pretty much a decade after they left the Big 12. And I don't get this whole Missouri is scared thing. Missouri's not scared of playing Kansas in a bowl game, especially a 6-6 bowl game, which I'll touch more on in a minute. But, the other thing is, too, that if Mizzou was so scared to play Kansas, then why are they scheduling to play them in the regular season starting in 2025? Like, I don't even get the outrage of Kansas and Missouri potentially not playing in a bowl game. First of all, this is a 6-6 bowl game for both teams. Both teams got to 6-6 in different ways, but at the end of the day, any bowl game that's not an NY6 bowl really doesn't matter. And with the current landscape of college football and the way that players opt out for the NFL draft and enter the transfer portal before these bowl games are even played, just shows how much the players don't even care about the bowl games. I mean, unless you're like a double-digit win team and you're playing in a really high bowl game, or you're in the college football playoff or in the hunt for the playoff, the bowl game just doesn't matter. The bowl game doesn't matter to them. And if the bowl game doesn't even matter to the teams actually playing in them, why do fans feel the need to care so much? I just think people are way too emotionally invested in this potential bowl game matchup, and they're too emotionally invested in a rivalry that quite honestly is outdated and only really older fans are that passionate about. Like, even these players that play on Kansas and Missouri they don't carry the same feelings for the rivalry that fans do. These guys that play for Kansas and Missouri were like 8, 9, 10 years old the last time these two teams played each other. And in Missouri's case, like, I don't know Kansas's roster situation, but Missouri has already lost several key players from the season. They'd be lucky to have half their starters from the season playing in this game. What's the incentive to playing? Like, it's a meaningless game. It doesn't even matter to the teams playing in it. Why should it matter to us? Why are we so desperate to see them play in a 6-6 bowl game? It's just, it doesn't make any sense to me, especially when these teams are going to play a real meaningful game in 2025 in the regular season. And let's just assume, for the sake of debate, that Missouri was scared to play Kansas in a bowl game, or they just really didn't want to play Kansas in a bowl game. Well, really, Missouri doesn't owe Kansas anything playing them in a bowl game. They don't have to play them in a bowl game, and they gain nothing from playing them in a bowl game. Because again, looking at this from a Mizzou perspective, your team isn't going to be the same at all as the one from the regular season. You got guys that, no offense, Kansas, the NFL actually wants. They're not going to play in the bowl game. There's already been an exodus of transfers. There's going to be more. There's going to be more people that decide not to play in the bowl game. It's going to be a watered-down team. Why are people so eager to see Mizzou and Kansas play when it's going to be two depleted rosters? I just don't get it. And for Mizzou, the reward for winning this game doesn't outweigh the risk of losing it, because even though, at least to me, the game doesn't really matter and the results of it shouldn't change anybody's mind about the trajectory of either program, people are going to take the results of the game and they're going to run with it. Just like they did that one year Kansas State beat LSU in a bowl game, even though it wasn't nearly LSU's team from the regular season, and that's why Kansas State beat them. They had third and fourth stringers out there all over, and Kansas State loves to hang that bowl win over people's heads, and it's like, okay, but you didn't really beat LSU. And that's exactly how I feel about this Kansas-Missouri game if it is played, and it does happen. Like, okay, if Missouri beats Kansas, oh, you were supposed to beat Kansas. It's Kansas. You know, like, they had a feel-good year going 6-6 and finishing 0-6 in their last games of the season. Like, okay, and then there's Missouri, where they're disappointed about their 6-6 season. They were 2 plays away from winning 8 games. If they lose to Kansas, it's, oh my God, Missouri lost to Kansas. You know, you're not supposed to lose to Kansas. And it's like, but yeah, but this isn't Missouri's real team. Bottom line, Kansas is excited about a bowl game. Missouri is kind of disappointed about it. And I understand that if Mizzou and or Kansas is going to play in a bowl game, that they would rather the bowl game be Missouri-Kansas, because that's at least a fun, exciting matchup in the rivalry and stuff like that. People would rather watch that than, you know, Mizzou versus some group of 5 school in the Gasparilla Bowl or something like that. And I can understand that. But again, what is the incentive for playing Kansas in a bowl game? Because I still think that no matter what bowl game Missouri gets, especially if it's like the Vegas Bowl or the Gasparilla Bowl, because that's in Florida, that's a more fun trip for fans around Christmas time. You also have a better chance of more players playing in the game, and it's a bowl game you can win, because there's a lot of Mizzou players that might transfer or opt out of the bowl game, but if they're like, oh, hey, you know, we're going to Florida, then some players might be like, yeah, you know what, a trip to Florida sounds pretty good. But Memphis and the Liberty Bowl, I mean, we were just there 3 years ago. Either way, I just think fans are like way too emotional about this. Like, we're talking about a 6-6 bowl game. This is the equivalent. This is the football equivalent of the NIT tournament in basketball. Like, who cares if Missouri and Kansas play each other in the football equivalent of the NIT? And fans love to say all the time, they'll agree with me, the bowl game doesn't matter. The bowl game isn't a big deal. And this is a thing I've noticed over the last several years, is fans don't care about the bowl game until the bowl game is played. People being mad about Mizzou not playing Kansas in a bowl game is yet another example of how fans apparently don't care about the bowl game until they do. The results of a meaningless bowl game with the 2 teams looking completely different from the regular season proves nothing about either team. If this was the regular season, 2 teams fully loaded, like, yeah, come on, bring it on. But let's not pretend the game would have mattered or been a reflection of the regular season at all. And besides, for this matchup to even happen, the Liberty Bowl has to want Missouri and Kansas in the game. I think the Liberty Bowl is going to end up going with Arkansas and Baylor because they like those 2 teams better, and the Liberty Bowl was never the first choice for either side, Missouri or the Liberty Bowl, and same goes for Kansas. So, like, I really don't know what we're doing here. This is a non-story. And saying that Mizzou is scared to play Kansas is, 1, inaccurate, and 2, Missouri doesn't get to decide what bowl game they play in. They have a little bit of pull, and there is some negotiating that goes into how the bowl games are decided and the matchups, but Missouri doesn't get to pick what bowl game they're in. And Eli Drinkwitz and the Mizzou official account even came out and said, no, this isn't true. We're not scared to play Kansas. We're not scared. Eli Drinkwitz posted a picture of the Liberty Bowl Stadium in Memphis. He don't care. So, like, again, I really don't know what we're doing here, and I don't know why people are so upset about it, even if it were true, because Missouri doesn't owe Kansas anything, and they don't. There's no incentive for them to play in a bowl game against Kansas. And quite honestly, people are going to hop on here and they're going to say, oh, well, then why do we play the bowl games at all? Well, I agree. Why do we play the bowl games at all? Because they're pointless. The only good thing about them is you get like 21 more practices with the team, and the guys get to have like a celebration of the season, and that's if they even care. And clearly most teams that end up in these lower tier bowl games, they don't care. It's more so an opportunity for the younger guys that typically don't play to get some game experience. That's really all it is. And that's what happened last year when Mizzou played Army in the Armed Forces Bowl. You know, Tyler Beatty, the reason that they were in that game, didn't even play, you know, because he was off to the NFL. Like, it's not a big deal. So, yeah, that's my take on this whole story, this whole situation. I really think it's a non-story. It never really was a story. And Mizzou is not ducking Kansas in a bowl game. I don't believe any of that for a second. And honestly, I don't really care for them to play Kansas. In fact, I'd rather Missouri play a better team for a chance at an upset. So those are my thoughts. Would love to hear from you guys, though. All that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Mizzou fans can find this. And check out my work on showmefootball.com. And I will see you all in the next one. MIZ.